I've been the sheriff of Elmwood County for going on 15 years now, ever since I traded my Army fatigues for a badge and came back to this dusty, forgotten corner in Nevada. Elmwood's the kind of place where time moves slow, like molasses in January. Folks still wave at each other on the dirt roads, their pickups kicking up clouds of red dust that settle on everything, porches, mailboxes, even the laundry hanging on the line. The county's tucked away about 50 miles from the nearest highway, a ribbon of cracked asphalt that feels like it's hiding from the rest of the world. Out here, it's just sagebrush, red rock canyons carved by eons of wind and water, and a sky so big it makes you feel like you're drowning in stars. The canyons, with their jagged edges and rusty hues, look like they were etched by God's own chisel, standing silent and ancient against the endless desert sprawl. Population's about 2,500, give or take, mostly ranchers who've worked the same stubborn land for generations, a handful of retirees chasing cheap living and solitude, and the occasional lost tourist hunting ghost towns or old silver mines that dried up a century ago. What really puts Elmwood on the map, though, if you can call a speck like this a map dot, is the Lockheed-Martin facility out on the eastern edge of the county. Officially, it's a research and development center for aerospace technology. But good luck getting a straight answer about what they're actually doing behind those walls. The place is a fortress, 12-foot chain-link fences topped with razor wire, floodlights that burn brighter than the noonday sun, and security patrols in sleek black SUVs that roll through like they're guarding the president. It's Area 51's little brother, minus the tourist kitsch and UFO gift shops. Nobody from town works there. They bus in their own people from Vegas or Reno, suits and scientists who don't mix with locals. The facility's been there about a decade, ever since Lockheed-Martin swooped in, bought up a massive chunk of federal land, and built their compound practically overnight. They call it Project Horizon, a name that sounds like it was ripped from a sci-fi novel. Rumors swirl like dust devils around here. Folks at Millie's Diner, the town's greasy spoon and gossip hub, speculate about drones, stealth jets, or something straight out of a Hollywood blockbuster. Some say they're tinkering with tech that can make a fighter jet vanish into thin air. Others whisper about experiments too wild to name. I've always chalked it up to bored locals spinning yarns over burnt coffee and pie, but every now and then I catch myself wondering what's really going on out there. I'm Harlan Tate, 48 years old, with a bum knee from my Army days and a stubborn streak that's kept me in this job longer than I ever planned. I grew up in Elmwood, back when it was even smaller, if you can believe it, before the diner got a new jukebox or the gas station started selling vape pens. After high school, I enlisted, did 2 tours in Iraq as a military policeman, and came home with a few scars and a low tolerance for bullshit. Being sheriff suits me, mostly. It's not glamorous. Half my job is breaking up bar fights at the Rusty Spur or helping Mrs. Callahan find her runaway goats. But it's honest work, and I know these people like the back of my hand. My wife, Sarah, teaches 3rd grade at Elmwood Elementary, the only school within 40 miles. She's got a laugh that can light up a room and a knack for keeping me grounded. We live in a double-wide trailer on the outskirts of town, just off a dirt track lined with creosote bushes. It's not much, but it's home, with a sagging porch, a view of the canyons, and an AC unit that groans like it's on its last legs. Our kids are grown and gone. Ellie's studying biology at the University of Arizona in Tucson, dreaming of saving the planet one lizard at a time. Jake's slinging burgers in Reno, chasing a music career that's yet to take off. So it's just me, Sarah, and Buster, our lazy old bloodhound who'd rather sleep through a dust storm than chase a rabbit. It was a Tuesday night in late summer, the kind where the heat clings to you like a bad hangover, even after the sun dips below the horizon and paints the sky in bruised purples and oranges. I was sprawled on the couch in the living room, nursing a lukewarm Coors and half watching the Searchers on the old tube TV. John Wayne was squinting into the distance, looking like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders, and I was starting to doze when the radio crackled on the coffee table. Sarah had turned in early. She's up at dawn to prep lesson plans for her 3rd graders, and she doesn't mess around with her sleep schedule. The only sound in the trailer was the hum of the AC and Buster's soft snores from his spot by the door. "Sheriff Harlan, you copy?" It was Mary Lou, our dispatcher, her voice sharp through the static. She's been manning the desk at the sheriff's office since before I was born, a chain-smoking widow with a voice like gravel and a memory for every call she's ever taken. "Go ahead, Mary Lou," I said, sitting up and rubbing my eyes. "Got a call from old man Whitaker out on County Road 12. Says there's some wild encounters by his property line. Sounds spooked. Mentioned lights in the sky and noises like nothing he's heard before. Wants you to check it out." Whitaker's a crusty old Vietnam vet who runs a small cattle operation on a patch of scrubland about 10 miles from town. His ranch is a patchwork of barbed wire and wind-battered barns, sitting right up against the Lockheed-Martin fence. His back 40 shares a boundary with their restricted zone, close enough that he can see their floodlights from his porch. He's called in before about coyotes snatching calves or kids joyriding ATVs too close to his fence line, but never this late and never sounding like he'd seen a ghost. The lights in the sky bit made me pause. Whitaker's not the type to get rattled easy. He's seen worse than most in the jungles of Da Nang, but he's also not above a tall tale after a few whiskeys. 10-4, Mary Lou, I said, setting the beer down and grabbing my Stetson from the hook by the door. Tell him to sit tight and keep his shotgun handy, but don't go fire in the shadows. I'm heading out. I pulled on my boots, clipped my badge to my belt, and checked my service pistol, a Glock 22 that seemed more range time than action. The drive out took about 20 minutes in my county-issued F-150, the headlights slicing through the pitch-black night. No moon tonight, just a blanket of stars overhead, the Milky Way sprawling like spilled sugar across the sky. Elmwood's far enough from city lights that the night feels alive, like the universe is watching you back. The gravel road crunched under my tires, and the air smelled of dust and sagebrush, sharp and dry. As I drove, my mind wandered to the Lockheed facility. Project Horizon's been a sore spot for years. They showed up a decade ago, fast-tracked by some federal deal nobody in town was privy to. The construction was a spectacle, convoys of heavy equipment rolling through at all hours, followed by military Humvees and men in suits who didn't talk to anyone. They built that compound in months, like they were racing a deadline. Trucks still come and go, sometimes at 2 a.m., sometimes with armed escorts that look more Pentagon than private contractor. I've had my share of run-ins with them. Trespassers mostly. Conspiracy nuts and RVs with binoculars and cheap drones, convinced the place is a hub for reverse engineering alien tech. One guy back in 2018 swore he saw a UFO land behind the fence, a glowing disc the size of a barn. I laughed it off, wrote him up for trespassing and sent him packing. But the questions linger. Why build out here, in the middle of nowhere? Why the secrecy? I've asked for a courtesy tour, just to put the rumors to rest, but the feds stonewall me every time, citing national security. Even the county records on the land deal are sealed tighter than a bank vault. It's enough to make a man wonder, especially on nights like this, when the desert feels like it's holding its breath. As I neared Whitaker's place, the Lockheed fence came into view, its floodlights casting an eerie glow across the sagebrush. The air felt heavier, like the prelude to a storm, though the sky was clear. I slowed the truck, my hand resting on the Glock, and wondered what the hell I was about to walk into. I pulled up to Whitaker's gate around 11:30 p.m., the F-150's tires crunching on the gravel drive that wound past a rusted cattle guard. The night was still, the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums, broken only by the faint chirp of crickets and the occasional low of a spooked cow. Whitaker's ranch house stood at the end of the path, a weathered single-story with peeling white paints and a sagging porch that looked like it had seen better days. His porch light cast a sickly yellow glow, illuminating a clutter of old tractor parts, a chipped rocking chair, and a faded American flag hanging limp on a pole. The light didn't reach far, leaving the surrounding desert swallowed by darkness, as if the night itself was trying to keep secrets. Jim Whitaker was pacing out front, his silhouette sharp against the glow. He gripped a flashlight in one gnarled hand and his Remington 870 shotgun in the other, the barrel glinting faintly. His gray beard was unkempt, his flannel shirt tucked haphazardly into jeans that sagged at the knees. At 68, Jim looked like he'd been carved from the same red rock as the canyons, tough, worn, and stubborn as hell. His eyes, though, were wild tonight, darting toward the horizon like a man who'd seen something he couldn't unsee. "Evening, Sheriff," he rasped, his voice scraped raw from years of Marlboros and shouting at livestock. "Glad you came quick. It's out there again. Started about an hour ago. Lights hovering over the fence line, not like any drone or chopper I've ever seen. And the sounds, Jesus, Harlan, it's like thunder mixed with some kind of electronic whine, like a jet engine having a nightmare. My cows are going nuts, huddled up in the barn like the devil himself coming for 'em. Lost 2 calves last month, and I'm starting to think it ain't coyotes." I nodded, keeping my face neutral to steady him. Jim wasn't prone to hysterics. Vietnam had burned that out of him, but I'd never seen him this rattled. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his grip on the shotgun, and his breath came in short puffs, visible in the cool night air. "All right, Jim," I said, my voice low and calm, the way I learned to talk down soldiers on edge back in Iraq. "Let's take a look. You stay here by the house. I'll check the property line. No shooting unless I say so. You hear?" He grunted, handing me a heavy mag light, its beam strong enough to cut through the dark. "Be careful, Sheriff. Whatever's out there ain't normal." His eyes flicked toward the Lockheed-Martin fence, a half-mile away, where floodlights stabbed into the sky like searchlights at a prison. That fence marked the edge of his world and the start of theirs. Project Horizon, the shadowy aerospace compound that had been Elmwood County's biggest mystery since it sprang up a decade ago. I hiked out through Whitaker's pasture, the dry grass and cheatweed crunching under my boots. The air was still warm, carrying the sharp, resinous scent of creosote bushes and the faint tang of dust that never quite settled in the desert. Overhead, the stars burned bright, a dizzying sprawl of constellations that made Elmwood feel like the edge of the universe. My boots kicked up small clouds of dirt as I crossed the uneven ground, passing a rusted water tank and a cluster of mesquite trees that looked like skeletal hands reaching for the sky. The Lockheed fence loomed closer with every step, its chain link and razor wire glinting under the distant floodlights. The facility itself was a dark shape against the horizon, all angular buildings and squat hangars, like a city built for machines, not people. I'd driven by aplenty, but up close, it felt different, oppressive, like it was watching me back. About 200 yards from the boundary, I felt it before I saw it, a low hum vibrating through the ground, like standing too close to a power substation or a diesel generator idling in the distance. It wasn't just sound, it was a sensation, buzzing up through my boots and into my bones, setting my nerves on edge. I clicked on the mag light, sweeping the beam across the sagebrush, half expecting to see a downed drone or a crew of Lockheed techs scrambling to cover up a mishap. But there was nothing, just an endless desert in that damn fence. Then I saw the lights. 3 orbs, glowing blue-white like welder's arcs, hovered about 50 feet up, just inside the Lockheed side of the fence. They weren't helicopters, no thump of rotors, no whine of turbines. They weren't stars either, too low, too bright, and moving in ways that defied physics. One orb bobbed lazily, like a buoy on a calm sea, while another darted sideways in a jittery zigzag pattern, fast and erratic, like a dragonfly on meth. The third hung still, pulsing faintly, as if it were breathing. My heart kicked up a notch, and my hand instinctively dropped to the Glock 22 on my hip, though what good a .40 caliber would do against that, I had no idea. I froze, the beam of my flashlight trembling slightly as I aimed it toward the lights. One of the orbs, the darting one, shot closer to the fence, maybe 30 yards from where I stood. And that's when I heard it, a piercing, high-pitched whine, like a dentist drill crossed with a jet engine winding up. It sliced through the hum, setting my teeth on edge and making my skin crawl. The cows in Whitaker's barn let out a chorus of panicked bellows, their silhouettes barely visible in the distance. My mind raced, grasping for explanations. A test flight gone wrong? Some bleeding-edge aircraft Lockheed was keeping under wraps? I'd seen plenty of strange things in the Army, experimental drones in the deserts of Iraq, classified tech that could make a Humvee disappear from radar. But this felt different, wrong. My thoughts drifted to stories I'd heard back in my military days, late-night bull sessions with buddies in intelligence who'd had a few too many beers. They'd whisper about black budget programs, DARPA projects with no paper trail, and Skunk Works, Lockheed's elite R&D division that birthed the SR-71 Blackbird and the F-117 Nighthawk. Those planes were science fiction in their day, so what was this? The next step? Or something else entirely? I thought of the rumors that clung to Nevada like dust. Area 51 was just a couple hundred miles north, a magnet for every UFO nut and conspiracy theorist with a blog or a podcast. I'd laughed off the stories, little green men, crashed saucers, government cover-ups. But out here, alone in the dark with those lights dancing in front of me, doubt crept in. I remembered a name, Bob Lazar, that whistleblower from the 80s who claimed he'd worked on alien craft at a site near Area 51. He talked about anti-gravity drives, energy weapons, tech that could bend space and time. The feds called him a crackpot, but his story never changed, and some folks swore he was telling the truth. What if Lockheed's Project Horizon wasn't just building drones or stealth jets? What if they were reverse engineering something not from this world? The idea was crazy, but standing there with that unearthly hum vibrating through me and those orbs defying every rule of aerodynamics, crazy didn't seem so far-fetched. I shook my head, trying to focus. I was a sheriff, not Fox Mulder. My job was to keep the peace, not chase X-Files fantasies. But as I stared at those lights, my gut told me this wasn't just a malfunctioning prototype. Something was happening out here. Something big, and I was standing on the edge of it. The question was, did I walk away and call it in, or did I get closer and risk finding out what Lockheed was hiding behind that fence? Maybe Lockheed's got a piece of that cosmic pie right here in Elmwood, hiding it in plain sight, using our isolation as a cloak. Out here, 50 miles from the nearest highway, with nothing but sagebrush and canyons for company, you could hide a whole fleet of flying saucers and no one would bat an eye. The thought sent a chill down my spine despite the desert heat. What if those wild encounters Whitaker reported weren't coyotes or joyriding teens? What if they were leaks from Lockheed's experiments, test subjects breaking free, or portals cracking open because they're meddling with tech no human should touch? My mind spiraled to the wilder corners of the internet I'd skimmed late at night, unable to sleep. Anonymous forums like Above Top Secret or threads on X where self-proclaimed insiders posted cryptic warnings about black site facilities like Project Horizon. They claim places like this were breeding grounds for things straight out of a fever dream. Hybrid programs blending human and alien DNA, super soldiers engineered for wars we don't even know about, or mind control devices to keep the public docile and distracted. Some even whispered about deals with extraterrestrials, greys, or reptilians, trading tech secrets for human abductions. Crazy talk, sure, but standing there in the dark with that unnatural hum still buzzing in my bones, it didn't feel so crazy. I shook my head, trying to snap out of it. Paranoia's a slippery slope in a job like mine. Too many nights chasing shadows, and you start seeing conspiracies in every dust cloud. I'm a sheriff, not some tinfoil hat podcaster. My job is to keep Elmwood safe, not to play Indiana Jones with government secrets. But as I stood there, gripping the mag light until my knuckles ached, one of the orbs pulsed brighter, its blue-white glow flaring like a camera flash. And then, God help me, I swear I saw something detach from it. A shadow, humanoid but wrong. Too thin and too fast, skittered along the ground inside the Lockheed fence line. It moved like nothing human, all jerky and fluid at the same time, before vanishing into the dense brush beyond the floodlights. My heart slammed against my ribs, and my mouth went dry as the desert itself. I fumbled for my radio, thumbing the button to call Mary Lou for backup. "Mary Lou, you copy? Got something weird out here at Whitaker's. Need another unit. But the static roared back, a wall of white noise so fierce it drowned out my voice, like whatever was out there was jamming the signal. I took a step back, my boots sinking into the soft dirt, and swept the flashlight beam across the fence line again. The orbs were still there, bobbing silently, but the shadow was gone. My mind raced for a rational explanation, maybe a trick of the light or one of Lockheed's security drones casting a weird silhouette. But deep down, I knew better. I'd seen plenty in my Army days, insurgents vanishing into the desert, tech that could make a tank look like a mirage. This wasn't that. This was something else. Something that made the hairs on my neck stand up like I was a kid hearing ghost stories at the county fair. I turned and hiked back toward Whitaker's ranch house, my boots crunching louder now as adrenaline sharpened my senses. The night had gone quiet again, the hum and whine fading like a bad dream, leaving only the faint rustle of wind through the mesquite. Jim was still on the porch, his shotgun resting against his shoulder, his flashlight beam cutting wild arcs across the yard. His dog, a mangy mutt named Rusty, whined softly from under the porch, tail tucked tight. Jim's face was a map of worry lines under the brim of his old John Deere cap, his eyes searching mine as I approached. "What'd you see, Sheriff?" he asked, his voice low, like he was afraid the desert itself was listening. The shadow I'd seen on Jim's land wasn't just a trick of the light. It was a violation of everything I thought I knew about the world. By nightfall, I'd made a reckless choice. I wasn't waiting for Kessler's canned denials or Millie's diner gossip. I needed answers, and I'd get them by breaking into Project Horizon myself. I grabbed my old service pistol, a Ka-Bar knife, a flashlight, bolt cutters, and a crowbar from the shed, stuffing them into a battered rucksack. The desert night was frigid, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant yip of a coyote. I parked my F-150 2 miles out, hidden in a dry wash choked with creosote bushes, and started the hike, my boots sinking into the sandy soil. The Lockheed-Martin facility loomed like a fortress carved from the desert itself, its 12-foot chain-link fence bristling with razor wire and studded with motion sensors. Floodlights swept the perimeter in erratic arcs, their beams cutting through the dark like knives. I crouched behind a jagged boulder, my breath fogging in the chill, and studied the pattern. A gap in the camera coverage near a rusted drainage grate gave me my shot. I sprinted low, the bolt cutters trembling in my hands as I snipped through the fence, each metallic snap sounding like a gunshot in my head. The grate was loose, bolted poorly, sloppy for a place like this. I pried it open with the crowbar, wincing at the screech of metal, and crawled through, mud and grit smearing my jacket. A drone buzzed overhead, its red LED pulsing like a predator's eye. I flattened myself in the ditch, heart hammering as its thermal scanner hummed. It passed, but I knew I was on borrowed time. Inside the perimeter, the facility was a labyrinth of brutalist concrete buildings, their featureless walls lit by flickering sodium vapor lamps that cast a sickly orange glow. The air reeked of ozone, diesel, and something acrid, like burnt hair mixed with battery acid. I darted between stacks of crates marked property of LM Corp. And rusted maintenance sheds, my flashlight off to avoid detection. Every step echoed in my skull, and the hum I'd heard earlier was now a bone-deep thrum, like a giant tuning fork buried in the earth. It wasn't mechanical, it pulsed with intent, alive and malevolent. My skin crawled, but I pressed on, weaving through alleys littered with discarded circuit boards and strange shimmering metal fragments that didn't look human-made. I found a service door tucked behind a generator, its keypad glowing faintly green. Dusting the keys with a puff of desert dirt revealed smudged prints on 2, 5, 8, and 0. I tried combinations, sweat beading on my forehead despite the cold, until the lock clicked. The door hissed open, releasing a blast of sterile air that stank of antiseptic and something coppery, like blood left to congeal. The corridor beyond was a sterile tunnel of white tiles and fluorescent lights, some flickering erratically, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own.
I crept forward, pistol in one hand, knife in the other, my pulse loud enough to drown out the hum. Locked doors lined the walls, their labels chillingly vague. Horizon 9, Neural Interface Array, Containment Zone Alpha.
One door had a biohazard symbol scorched into the metal as if branded by a blowtorch. The hum grew louder, a rhythmic pulse that vibrated in my chest, guiding me to a massive steel hatch at the corridor's end. It looked like it belonged on a nuclear bunker, with a small, fogged window smeared with condensation. I wiped it clean with my sleeve and nearly dropped my gun. Beyond was a vast chamber, lit by strobing blue lights that pulsed in sync with the hum. At its center hung a colossal orb, the size of a pickup truck, black as a starless night, but shimmering with an oily, iridescent sheen. It floated in a web of cables, sensors, and glowing conduits, its surface rippling like liquid. It wasn't technology, it was alive, breathing, its surface swelling and contracting as if it had a pulse. Shadows writhed inside it, shapes that defied geometry, limbs too long, torsos bent at impossible angles, eyes that flickered like dying embers in a void. Two figures in hazmat suits moved below, their visors reflecting the orb's eerie glow. They carried tablets, their movements jerky, almost mechanical, as they muttered in a language that wasn't human. Clicks, hisses, and guttural drones, like a swarm of locusts given voice. One tapped their tablet, and the orb pulsed violently, the hum spiking into a scream that clawed at my mind. I gripped my head, vision blurring, as the sound burrowed into my skull, whispering in a language I couldn't understand, but felt in my bones. Intruder. Witness. Eliminate. Then came the chaos, the scariest sight I'd ever seen. The orb split open, a jagged tear like reality itself ripping apart. A clawed appendage, segmented and glistening like wet obsidian, snaked out, its surface etched with glowing runes that burned my eyes to look at. It stretched toward a reinforced crate labeled Specimen 23, which shuddered as if something inside was desperate to escape. The crate's bolts snapped, and the lid exploded outward, revealing a creature that made my blood freeze. It was humanoid but wrong, gray, emaciated, its skin stretched tight over a skeletal frame. Its head was too large, its mouth a lipless gash that split into a scream, not sound, but a psychic wave of raw terror that slammed into me like a freight train. Its eyes, black, reflective, like twin voids, locked onto me through the window. It saw me, and in that moment, I felt it rooting through my thoughts, peeling back memories like pages in a book. Alarms erupted, a deafening klaxon that shook the walls. Red lights strobed, bathing the corridor in blood-like hues. The hatch hissed, beginning to open, and I bolted, my boots slipping on the tiles. Behind me, the creature's scream echoed, not in my ears, but in my mind, a chorus of voices promising annihilation. I sprinted through the corridor, past doors now unlocking with mechanical clanks, as if the facility itself was waking up. A hazmat-suited figure appeared at the far end, raising a sleek, unfamiliar weapon that hummed with energy. I dove behind a crate as a bolt of blue plasma scorched the wall where I'd been, leaving a smoking crater. The compound was a war zone now. Drones swarmed overhead, their lasers slicing through the dark, and armed guards in black tactical gear poured from side buildings, shouting in that same alien tongue. I scrambled through an alley, tripping over a coil of glowing cables that sparked and writhed like snakes. A drone locked onto me, its beam grazing my arm, searing through my jacket and burning my skin. I fired my pistol blindly, the shots ringing in my ears, and heard a satisfying crunch as the drone spiraled into a wall, exploding in a shower of sparks. I reached the fence, diving through the cut section, razor wire tearing my leg as I went. Blood soaked my jeans, but adrenaline kept me moving. Behind me, the facility was a chaos of sirens, flashing lights, and that relentless hum, now a roar that shook the ground.
I stumbled to my truck, fumbling the keys as a spotlight pinned me from above. A chopper, black and unmarked, roared into view, its blades whipping the desert into a sandstorm. I floored the gas, the F-150 fishtailing as I tore through the wash, rocks pinging off the undercarriage. Back at my trailer, I barricaded the door, hands shaking as I loaded every round I had into the pistol and grabbed my shotgun for good measure. Buster was snarling, hackles up, staring at the window where shapes moved in the dark, too many, too fast, circling like wolves. The phone rang, and Kessler's voice cut through, cold and sharp. "Harlan, you've seen too much. Stay put, and maybe you live. Run, and you're done like Carl." I slammed the receiver down, my heart a jackhammer. Outside, the desert wasn't silent anymore. Drones hummed, boots crunched, and that psychic scream lingered, a promise of something ancient and hungry waking up. The orb wasn't just a project, it was a gate, and Lockheed had torn it open. Elmwood was a speck on the map, but it was ground zero now. I gripped my shotgun, knowing I couldn't fight what was coming, but I'd be damned if I went down without a swing. The shadows closed in, and the hum grew louder, vibrating in my soul.